My guest this evening is Angela Davis, and Angela has been up to a good many things in her career, and we'll be talking about them. Currently, she is teaching at San Francisco State in the School of Ethnic Studies and Women's Studies, and in her spare time, she's teaching at the San Francisco Art Institute. Welcome, Angela.
Thank you. Thank you.
Why are you in Tucson?
Well, I'm here in Tucson in connection with the national elections campaign. I am the vice presidential candidate of the Communist Party along with Gus Hall, who was the presidential candidate. And right now we are trying to achieve ballot status as independents on the People Before Profits ticket.
Why would you not seek ballot status in the Communist Party?
Well, we are in some states. It really depends on the kind of movement that exists in relationship to the campaign. In some states, we are seeking ballot status, and we've achieved ballot status as communists, where there is a strong communist party, and where most of the people working on the campaign are communist. In other states, there are broader forces involved in the campaign, people who may not be communists, but who agree with our program. And in those states, we're seeking ballot status as independents.
What would be your program?
Well, the theme of our program is People Before Profits. And what we're talking about, basically, is the redefinition of the country's priorities so that the needs of people, working people, people of color, women, youth, senior citizens can be met. We feel that the vast corporate monopolies in this country are defining the affairs of the nation in accordance with their drive for profits. And we should talk about redefining those so that, for example, everybody in the country has the right to a job, so that the wages that workers receive, men and women workers alike, are sufficient in order to guarantee a relatively comfortable lifestyle. We're talking about putting an end to the racism that is cropping up all over the country. And we're talking about eradicating the possibility of war. Both Ronald Reagan and Jimmy Carter have unfortunately talked about increasing the military budget, building more weapons of death and destruction. We feel that the tax money, our taxpayers' money, that goes into the creation of the MX missile or the Trident submarine should actually be used to establish a free healthcare system, a quality educational system, low-cost housing, and in general to serve the needs of the people of this nation.
When you spoke about eliminating war, let us suppose that we did have a communist government in charge in the United States. Why would that eliminate preparation for war? Because you have Russia and you have China, both communistic countries, and yet if the United States wasn't in the middle striking balance, they would both be armed to the teeth against each other.
Well, in terms of the main nuclear powers in the world today, they are the United States and the Soviet Union. It's important that the arms race between the U.S. and the Soviet Union come to an end. The SALT II treaty, which has been proposed, which the Soviet Union is ready to sign, is extremely important. As a result of the increasingly hawkish policies of the Carter administration, molded, I think, basically by Zbigniew Brzezinski, we've moved away from that process of nuclear disarmament. And I mention that because it's important to prevent the possibility of a nuclear holocaust by any means. If whatever we're struggling for, whatever victories we win, they won't mean anything if in the final analysis there is a nuclear war.
When you say whatever we're struggling for, by any means, when you use those type of words, I can't help think of the people of Poland right now who are under a communistic government, and yet they were struggling for their own independent rights as individuals, some of the rights that we take for granted in this country.
And they were struggling for higher wages. And they were struggling. There were a number of issues of the strike. I think it's important to look at what happened in Poland, understanding that there are problems in socialist countries. There are problems that still remain to be solved all over the socialist community. But where in the capitalist world would you have a situation where workers could go out on strike and the government would sit down and negotiate with them and come up with a satisfactory conclusion to the negotiations? I think it was very strange in this country that we had headlines all over announcing workers' victory in Poland. I want to see those same newspapers take the position that workers in the United States have the right to strike, have the right to demand higher wages and make demands for better benefits, health care, and so forth. And to see the newspapers and the media in general proclaim their victory. I think that what happened in Poland is a sign of the strength of socialism as opposed to its weakness, even though there are problems. But the problems can be solved in a system which is not based on private profits.
I want to come back and I'll ask Angela Davis about, under a communist government, what she would do about freedom of the press. But first we need to pause. I promised you before that commercial break that I would ask Angela what she would do about freedom of the press if this were a communistic country.
Okay, well, first of all, I should perhaps make it clear that our program is not a program for communism. It's not even a program for socialism at this point. It's an anti-monopoly program, so that as we campaign, we talk about the need to build a new political party that would be a coalition of other progressive parties, the labor movement, the women's movement, the seniors movement, etc., in order to be victorious in relationship to the Democrats and the Republicans in another election some years from now, hopefully. If there were the possibility of my being elected as vice president, there is no possibility, of course, we would have the widest range of freedoms. We, of course, would have freedom of the press, freedom of speech. Those are very important. And I think that the anti-communist propaganda that has been so influential in this country for such a long time has given the impression that communism means denial of freedom. On the contrary, I am a communist because I think it can expand our freedoms. And I think that there's some basic freedoms, too, that are not respected at all in this country, such as the right to a job, or the right to free medical care, the right to receive an education without having to pay for it, the right that women should enjoy to have subsidized free child care, the right that women workers should enjoy to maternity leaves. And I think those are the kinds of things that we really have to fight for in this country.
Why are you doing this? You mentioned that you know that you really realistically do not have a chance of being vice president. Why do you take your weekend after teaching all week and come to Tucson to talk about the Communist Party and about the presidential race?
Because I think more and more people have grown disillusioned about the two-party system. There are many people all over the country today who really are very upset that the range of our choice in the upcoming elections involves a Ronald Reagan and a Jimmy Carter. Their programs, while they might appear to be different, are substantially the same. We're conducting this campaign because it's important to give people an alternative. There are many people who simply have decided that they don't want to go to the polls and vote on November 4th. even though we can't win, we feel that we can give people the opportunity to lodge a protest, to vote no against unemployment, to say with their vote that they want to end racism, to say with their vote that they do not want to see the draft take thousands of young men away to an imperialist war again. And we feel that by doing this, we contribute to the building of a mass movement which can influence whoever is elected, which can assist in pushing the policies of the country in a direction that coincides more with the needs and interests of the people.
Are you saying that regardless of Jimmy Carter or Ronald Reagan, that you feel there should be more than two parties in the country?
Exactly, exactly. And we are encouraging people to vote for us, but at the same time we are encouraging those who may not be prepared to vote for the communist candidates to vote for other independent, progressive candidates. It's important, I think, to break the stronghold of the two-party system simply because it really is not a two-party system. Both parties are tied to the corporate monopolies in this country. Both parties take their leadership from big business, and it's time, I think, to begin to establish a party based on what people want.
But on the other hand, if you have a multi-partied country, then you have a situation such as Italy and to some extent even Israel, where they're having very tough times keeping a majority together. So you have government by chaos in that situation.
Well, I think that when you talk about government by chaos, that would more appropriately describe what's happening right now. It's extremely chaotic, it seems to me, to have all of these billions of dollars going into the Pentagon when Jimmy Carter made a promise before he was elected last time that he would reduce the military budget. He promised that he would provide jobs for black people. And today, more black people than ever before are unemployed. Black youth in some communities are unemployed in numbers that approach 80%. And that is, there is social chaos that prevails now, and it's necessary to begin to bring some order into the country.
With that, we'll pause for a commercial. Guest is Angela Davis, and Angela is running for the Vice Presidency of the United States on the independent ticket or the communist ticket, depending on which state you're looking at the ballot.
Right.
How difficult is it to collect signatures?
Well, first of all, I think that the point should be made that there are restrictions for all third parties attempting to achieve ballot status in every state of this country. The system that exists ensures that you will have basically the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. In some states, such as California, it's necessary to collect over 100,000 valid signatures. We collected close to 135,000 and were still refused ballot status in New York, in California. In New York, it's necessary to collect I think 40,000. Here in Arizona, the number is a little more than 5,000 for independent status, and that's what we've been attempting to do here.
And of course the problem is anyone who has voted in a primary of either party may not sign your petition.
Well, there are restrictions such as that do exist from state to state. One of the real absurdities of the system is that there's no continuity whatever between the states. In one state you might have a nominating convention of 200 or more people, you achieve ballot status that way. In Alabama it was necessary this year only to file some, I think, 200 copies of the party's emblem, and that's a law that goes all the way back to the 19th century.
I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you about that whole section of your life that came about because of the Soledad brothers. And you took it upon yourself to free them from what you termed illegal lynching, I believe.
Well, I was teaching at UCLA, the University of California in Los Angeles, and I was fired from my position in the Department of Philosophy because I was a member of the Communist Party. The case of the Soledad brothers arose around that time. They were charged with killing a guard. In actuality, they were under attack, we came to find out, because of the political organizing George Jackson, John Clouchet, Fleta Drumgo were doing in the prison system in California. I felt it was important for to become involved in their campaign because I was a victim of political repression within the realm of academia. I had lost my job because of my political beliefs and activities. They stood to lose their lives, and that's why I attempted to draw the connection between those two cases.
The harassment that you received from that case, including being on the FBI's 10 most... What kind of feeling goes through your heart when you find out you're on the 10 most wanted list for the FBI?
I was very frightened. I was very frightened because, first of all, I was charged with murder, kidnapping, and conspiracy. And then when the FBI released their wanted poster, it became clear that they were issuing an invitation to anyone to shoot me down on sight. I was defined as a dangerous criminal. I was unarmed. The reason I left California was because I had experienced situations where people who were charged with crimes, people who were innocent, had turned themselves in and were shot down by the police. Bobby Hutton, for example, tried to surrender to the police in Oakland in 1968, I think it was, and he was shot down in cold blood. A survey was done around the time I left in Los Angeles in the black community, and the majority of the people said that they thought that I should have gone underground because they knew that it would be impossible to receive a fair trial. And of course, later with the creation of a mass movement, with the involvement of people all over the country, the possibilities for receiving some kind of justice became greater, and and of course eventually I was acquitted as a result of the work that was done by people of all colors, all over the country and all over the world.
What did that legal defense cost you?
It didn't cost me anything because I didn't have any money. If you're not a tenured professor, you don't get very much in the way of salary. So I think I had about $100 in the bank when I was arrested. The committee raised funds. It cost, I think the figure that I've heard is something maybe like $200,000. And the lawyers did not receive very much in the way of pay. They got what they needed to take care of themselves and their families, but most of that money went into interviewing witnesses, doing surveys, the briefs, etc.
We'll be back after this message. And we were just talking about her bout with the penal criminal system in this country. You were finally arrested, I believe, and you were held without bond.
Yes, from October of 1970 until the end of February 1972, in jails in New York and San Jose and Marin County. And finally, the state of California overturned the death penalty. I became eligible for bail, but actually received bail only because within a few days of the decision of the California Supreme Court, letters and telegrams came from all over the world to the judge demanding that I be released on bail. And when he did announce his decision, he said that he was aware of the fact that there were people all over the world who were concerned about me, so that obviously brought about my release.
How does a woman of your intelligence, PhD, a scholar, What happens to your mind when you're in jail?
It was a very difficult experience. I was held in solitary confinement for all except 6 weeks of the period that I spent in jail. I had to fight, struggle to continue to maintain my sanity. I did a lot of reading. Fortunately, I was co-counsel in my case so that I could receive literature that I deemed necessary for the preparation of my defense. And then the real support, the real strength came from the knowledge that there were so many people who were concerned about me. And I say that because I know that even today there are people, men and women in the prisons across the country who don't have that kind of support and who literally are driven to desperation by the long years that they spend in prison. I'm presently co-chairperson of the National Alliance Against Racist and Political Repression. We're continuing to fight for the emancipation of political prisoners and all victims of penal repression in this country.
I have one quick question because we're out of time and we didn't even get to touch on feminism at all. You were known as a radical, as a renegade, as someone who will get up and shout if you're angry. If you had your life to live over, would you choose the same role for yourself?
Well, I think that if I had my life to live over, I would attempt to make whatever contribution I could toward the creation of a society where there is no more oppression, where there is no more exploitation or racism or sexism. It happened that my case was spotlighted. That was a historical accident. What was important was that people came to my assistance, and we have to continue to struggle in that way.
And that's been my conversation with Angela Davis. Thank you for joining us on Talk It Over.